Hello, hello, my name is Clark Heron, aka the Hairy Hobo, and welcome to another episode of AKA Sports. And boy, do we have a lot to talk about this week. And join with me, as always, the man, the myth, the legend himself, the man simply known as Fletch. Fletch, hopefully your weekend has gone well. Hopefully you did well in fantasy football. Anything exciting in the world of fantasy football that you saw over this past weekend?
Um, Good question, man. I appreciate it too. I had a good week, good weekend. Got to enjoy some really good games this weekend, and also the kickoff of the NBA season. But fantasy football wise, I must say I don't have any big news. I mean, we've heard it all so far. The injuries and whatnot. But I guess there is big news, and I kind of mentioned this. Remember we had our fantasy football podcast a couple months ago now. It seems like it was yesterday, right?
Right.
Yeah, so if you recall, one of our do's and don'ts, or at least mine was be mindful of the bye weeks and try to avoid Hell Week, which is week 7 this year. We got 6 teams on bye weeks this year, and Clark, I must say, man, one of my leagues, I'm decimated. All of my starting running backs this week are off the waiver wire. So I guess you can say that's the interesting thing so far.
Yes, the apocalypse has affected all of us. If you're sitting at maybe
Yeah.
4-2, 5-1 or better, maybe it's not the biggest of deals to get one extra loss. But if you're 3-3 or less, getting that one extra loss could potentially push you out of the running. But that's what happens when there's six really good fantasy teams. Yes, including the Jaguars,
Yeah.
who have James Robinson, are on the same week bye. But this is probably the worst we've seen in all of fantasy football, at least as long as I've been doing it anyway. So hopefully it gets easier and better from this point moving forward. But
Hmm.
let's stick with the NFL. Let's jump into our NFL news here after we show everybody where to see us. Obviously, if you go to anchor.fm/aka sports or facebook.com/aka sports FB, you can find us there as well. Now let's go ahead and go back to the world of the NFL. This time we'll talk about a little bit of a trade rumors going around at this point. There was a
Oh
big
yeah.
one with Deshaun Watson just the other day. The Houston Chronicle came out stating there could be a three-team trade, including the Dolphins and the Washington football team sending Tua to Washington and a bunch of picks over to Houston for Deshaun Watson to go to Miami. However,
Mhm.
just like all the other trade rumors that we've heard with Deshaun Watson over this past year and a half or so at this point, it's kind of here and there. We're not sure exactly what to believe at this point. Just stay
Right.
tuned at this time. Obviously, it would be a mega trade to happen, but again, like we've mentioned many times before, that off the field kind of allegation kind of stuff, it's not going to go away even if you get traded. It's still going to
Nope.
be there. So we'll keep an eye on that. Now, Fletch, beyond the mega trade that could potentially happen, is there other names that you have heard come across the NFL trades as potential targets for teams?
Yeah, the other name that's been popping up and has been really over the last month is Indianapolis Colts running back Marlon Mack. Has been mentioned in quite a few trade I don't know, rumors. I've seen the Niners just with their injuries, the Seahawks as well with their injuries being mentioned as some suitable places. So it's possible that you could see Marlon Mack on the move. They do have a really good backfield with Jonathan Taylor leading them, Naheem Hines being a really good pass catcher for them and spelling Jonathan Taylor. And then you have Marlon Mack, who's, I mean, if you go back a few years, he actually played a very good role in being one of the leading rushers on that team before Jonathan Taylor arrived. So I mean he's off of an injury, but you could tell he's I would say he's fresh. He hasn't really played a lot. So I think he could really bring something to a few teams that might need a little bit of help. He's not old or anything either. So that'd be something to watch out, especially for like fantasy owners and then also too just any teams that could be in the running for him. They could help out, kind of build up that backfield a little bit or give you a little bit more depth in your backfield if you're one of those teams that, kind of got hit by the injury bug, like, say the Ravens or the Niners. Just a few of those teams come to mind as well. So we'll see how that goes. Nothing major outside of that, though. I think that's outside of Deshaun Watson, who's major news. That's the only other news that I have as far as trade rumors go.
Yeah, the only other name that I have heard was Ronald Jones from Tampa Bay Buccaneers was a name that was tossed
Uh,
out there. Granted, Bruce Arians, the head coach,
okay.
did come out and basically laugh at that statement. It seems like they're not willing
Hmm.
to move on from a potentially good backup there in case they need him in the playoffs, much like they needed Fournette last year when Ronald Jones was
Right.
having a few issues here and there. So just another name to keep in mind, just in case something does pop up. It's unlikely, but much more likely, like you mentioned, Marlon Mack could be on the move just because there's just not much more room left in Indianapolis at this point with JTT and
No,
Naeem Hines.
no.
Um, but we'll keep an eye on it. I know the trade deadline is coming up, but there might be some other names moving around. Nothing crazy at this point, but we'll definitely keep an eye on things. Staying in the NFL this past weekend, Baker Mayfield really kind of just re-injured his already made injury. It was a torn labrum in his non-throwing shoulder. He landed awkwardly when he got sacked by J.J. Watt against the Cardinals last week. He is out for tonight's game, so hopefully you don't have him in fantasy for football at this point. There's a lot of Browns out for tonight's game, including
Yeah.
OBJ. There is most of their offensive line, both of their starting running backs. It is a mess
Well,
there.
there was recent news, Clark. OBJ is going to give it a go tonight.
Oh, is he?
He's gonna at least gonna try. I mean, and we don't know what capacity, he'll play right now. But just checking out my sources here, I forgot who exactly it was, but I did read today that OBJ was going to give it a shot, man. But outside of him, I mean, I know there's a lot of he's active, and actually so is Jarvis. I'm reading right now. They both are active. And
Well,
bringing up injuries, so is Bridgewater. He's active tonight as well
correct, and they
and
also
starting.
talked about Fant being available tonight as well. So a little bit of
Yes.
help for the Browns, but there's two starting running backs out. Demetric Felton, along with uh, Ernest Johnson, will be leading the backfield
Yep.
there in Cleveland tonight. Um, could be very interesting to see how things go along. We'll see how long this injury keeps Mayfield out. I know he's played on it, so it's not something that he
Mhm.
can't continue to play on, but if it continues to fall like he did here, you might need surgery sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I read something pretty interesting too about Baker. The injury is something I guess, like you mentioned, he can play through, and they actually plan to play him after this game. Of course, he's inactive tonight, as you mentioned. Next week, he is supposed to, or at least they think he will be able to at least start. Now, obviously, Case Keenum is a very viable backup. He's been in the league for years, good vet. So I think the Browns are at least in good hands with somebody that they can at least trust to manage the game. But yeah, that Baker blow is, I mean, no matter how you feel about him, he does mean a lot to that Browns team and means a lot to their success. So without him, we'll see how far they can really go and how well Case Keenum can play. I feel like the last I saw Case Keenum was he the one that threw the pass that Stephon Diggs caught in Minnesota to put the
Correct.
Saints away?
Hmm.
Okay. I thought I had that right. That was, I think the last time I've really actually seen Case Keenum in, some meaningful football games. And I mean, everyone knows who knows football. He's probably one of the better backups to have in the league. So we'll see how this goes tonight. Pretty big game, but lot of injuries like you mentioned on the table for the Browns. The other thing I wanted to mention from this game, Clark, that's also very interesting on the injury side of things is Jerry Judy is actually he's not going to play, but he is working out before the game. They say he is progressing a lot faster than they assumed he would, and he could at this point after this week they're possibly listing him week to week.
Hey, nothing wrong with that, especially for someone that is a manager of Jerry Judy in a couple different leagues. Uh, take
Hmm.
an extra week and a half off, and come back ready to go because we are going to need you down the stretch for sure. But we'll
Oh
keep an
yeah.
eye on this game, and we'll talk about it next week on the podcast. Let us go ahead and move on to the next bit of news. This past Sunday, the Chicago Sky have won their first WNBA championship. Candace Parker going back home. She was a Chicago native and was able to
Mhm.
help her Sky team get to that championship game and win it all. I didn't catch any of the game. Fletch, did you watch any of the game and maybe some takes from that game?
Yeah, actually, I did, man. I mean, you know me, I'm basketball junkie through and through. So I'm glad they kind of wrapped up right before the NBA season, and they had a pretty good series. Chicago took the first game. Phoenix came back and answered and won the second game. Chicago decimated them game three, and that's when everybody kind of knew the series would probably be over. That game three score was ridiculous, 86-50. And then they put them away in game four. The funny part about this is, I guess Diana Taurasi, she broke a door at the arena, and they decided to go ahead and take that door on the parade in Chicago. So the ultimate troll there. I love a good troll, especially in the world of sports. So that was good. And then also too, man, shout out to Candace Parker. She went home, and for us that watch NBA, we know she's been on TNT quite a bit. She actually is really good on TNT, and then kind of got, but she's also taken some years off. I believe she had a kid during the middle of her career, so she took a couple years off, came back, and I'm glad she decided to go home. Not only did she go home this year, she was the first woman on the cover of NBA 2K, and then you turn around and you win a title. So it's been a great last 12 months for her. And shout out to her, it's well deserved. This I think it's her second NBA ring. The first one was with the Sparks, the team she was drafted by. And then everybody knows her track record there at Tennessee. So I mean, she's one of those legendary women's basketball players, and she just kind of added a little bit more to her legend. So big shout out to her. Clark, the other news in WNBA, really quick. I don't know if you noticed this, but the WNBA had their 25th anniversary this year, and they had a fan vote that allowed the fans to essentially vote on who they thought was the GOAT, the greatest of all time in the WNBA. Now, for us that know basketball, there are some that barely played in the WNBA because when it started, they were already like 30 plus years old. Um, Names like Cynthia Cooper and Cheryl Swoops and come to mind. So we don't know how, and then also Cheryl Miller, who a lot believe could be the GOAT of women's basketball. She never actually got to play professionally, so at least here in the states. So we really don't know who the actual GOAT in women's basketball is, at least in my opinion. But Diana Taurasi was voted as the GOAT, and she received a pretty dope like basketball. It was cased, very similar to what you do at Legit Framing. Very nice. Has gold on the basketball, it's like a diamond or silver colored ball. If you haven't seen this, I recommend everybody to Google it. It's pretty sweet. I don't know, I doubt the NBA would ever do anything like this because of the heated goat debate that it is. But at the same time, though, that was a pretty big accomplishment for her to be voted by the fans, and I thought the ball was pretty sweet too. So just something for the people to check out in case you're just interested and want to see something cool there. That was that kind of I thought it was pretty cool, especially by the WNBA doing that for her and acknowledging her as what the fans did.
Yeah, and agreed, and definitely want to congratulate the WNBA on 25 great years,
Heck
as
yeah.
well as the Chicago Sky winning their first WNBA championship game. We will keep up on the off season and see exactly what's going moving forward into their 26th season. Let us move on to the next news and notes. We'll be jumping over to college football. There was the great debate that happened and was born from the Oklahoma Texas Red River rivalry game where Spencer Rattler came in. He started the game. He didn't look great, so they brought in Caleb Williams, a true freshman. He looked phenomenal, helped them win that game. And since from that
Hmm.
moment, Spencer Rattler has kind of not really made the greatest impression upon really anybody at this point. He's really painted the picture of someone that kind of feels a little entitled, maybe someone that thought that the job was his and he could never lose it kind of deal. At least
Yeah.
that's the impression that I'm getting. But luckily for Caleb Williams, he's taken the opportunity and shined. But it seems like with Spencer Rattler, he is destined for the transfer portal. Is that kind of the same thinking as well?
Yeah, I feel the same thing happening. I think the plan originally for him, I would assume, would be to ball out this year, go get drafted, right? Was he eligible this year?
I'm not 100% sure if he was eligible this season.
Okay. So it'll be next season, technically, he
I
would have
think it
been.
was
Okay.
next season when he was going to be available.
It makes sense. So I mean, at this point in his career, I mean, I don't like how what's happening. I he removed on his I think his Instagram page, he removed Oklahoma from his page and just has quarterback there listed instead of quarterback of the Oklahoma or whatever he had before. I know he did that. Also too, there was rumors that they almost had to beg him to come back to the team and practice. Was a few rumors that were kind of tossed around. I mean, I look at it like this, Clark. We hold quarterbacks in a different light. They have more, responsibilities on and off the field than anybody else. And I mean, you can say unfairly so, but that comes with the position. If you know you want to be a quarterback, you know what comes with being a star quarterback. So, I mean, I think you need to behave as such, right? That's just how I would view it if I'm a star quarterback of a high school, college, or a professional team, or not even a star, just the quarterback of a team. You're kind of the role model or who people look up to and the captain most times in the locker room. So the behavior that we're seeing, man, it's a little childish. He does seem hurt, which I would understand. I would understand, but at the same time, you also have to understand there's a job that needs to be done, and the job that he was doing was not really up to par, especially because of who he is. I can see if this was an average quarterback. This is Oklahoma. Clark, remind me, who of the last like three quarterbacks in Oklahoma been that made it to the league?
I think every single one of them won a Heisman Trophy before heading to the league.
Or at least we're in the running, right? Was it Hurts, Baker, and who am I missing?
It was Murray along with
Yes, Kyler Murray.
Mayfield, and then also the one that transferred from Alabama. Can't remember his name right
Yeah,
now.
Jalen Hurts.
Jalen Hurts. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, you have three quarterbacks and that recently have gone to the league. And let's look at it. Jalen Hurts is a pretty solid starter for the Eagles. I mean, a little bit to be desired, but at least he's good and serviceable. Very good fantasy player. Kyler Murray looks like the MVP this season, and Baker just led his team to the playoffs last year and competed with the Chiefs and very well last year in the playoffs on the way to winning, I believe, like 11 or 12 games. This is the guy that's supposed to be coming in and essentially continuing this legacy of great Oklahoma quarterbacks. And we're getting this from him. So, I mean, granted, everybody can't be Baker Mayfield, Jalen Hurts, Kyler Murray, but at the same time, things that are expected of him are not happening on the field, and now they're not happening off the field. So, I mean, I wish the best for the kid. I do think maybe a change of scenery will help, but I think there's going to be a few things that he needs to do mentally and also, with his game to really right the ship here. I believe he has all the talent in the world, but I want to see the kid do well. But I think he may need to find a new home or, maybe right the ship there in Oklahoma to do so as well. It's up to him, to be honest with you. So we'll see how that goes. I'm not. What's your thoughts on Oklahoma situation right now, Clark?
Yeah, at this point they've found their quarterback with Caleb Williams. He's been absolutely phenomenal. I think Coach Lincoln Riley's even mentioned that unless they really need to make a change at this point, or he's starting to make freshman type mistakes from this point, he's going to be the starter moving forward. But
Okay.
for Rattler, it's pretty simple. You can rise up to the challenge and you can try and push your way and get better, not just maybe not for this team, but maybe the next team that you go to or the next league that you play in, or you can sit there and pout and continue to act those childish ways and be there. I mean, again, there's certain players that they're hit their peak in high school. There's certain players that hit their peak in college, and then there's players that can won't hit their peak until the NFL or in the professional standings. I don't know. I don't think he's hit his peak in college or in high school, but at this point, mentally, it kind of feeling that way where he hasn't really truly matured and hasn't gone past that hype that I'm sure he had when he was in high school. I mean, he was probably the big
Right.
man on campus, that sort of thing. But yeah, you go to college, you're amongst other people that are just as talented as you are, and if you can't live up to
Right.
that challenge, there's no way on this planet that you're going to live up to any challenge when you get drafted to the NFL. There are plenty
Mm,
of great NFL quarterbacks that just don't make it, but they were great in college because sometimes it just happens that way. But the better ones have some kind of chip on their shoulder and they persevere through it and then they find greatness via that way. We'll see if that happens with him. Like you said, hopefully that does. But at this point,
right.
he is pretty much destined for the transfer portal at this point. Um,
Yeah.
but we'll see what happens moving forward. Last but not least, into the college football realm, Ed Orgeron and the University of Louisiana State has decided
Hmm.
they're going to part ways at the end of the season, which was a little bit of a surprise because a lot of the analysts that was talking on college football game day were saying that if he won the game this past Saturday against Florida, it was kind of playing for his coaching career or kind of survival game. Uh, but it seemed like didn't matter what happened, either win or lose, it was just going to happen. But it kind of sounded like, based on what I saw, at least via news, there was some off the field incidences that were being brought up that could have potentially
Uh-huh.
been part of this decision, partly because he was, having friendly conversations with a wife of a higher up LSU uh, uh, individual. So we'll see if that's any truth to that. But definitely on the field side of things, he's been struggling. Hasn't really done anything since they won the national championship with Joe Burrow. Beyond that, it's been a little bit of a struggle to really kind of find the identity of that team, either offensively or defensively. So it makes sense to part
Mhm.
ways, but I'm not 100% convinced that it was just strictly on the field stuff, the reason why for the departure.
Yeah, I agree. It was not on the field that I believe led to the parting ways, or I mean, we know he essentially got fired. He's just they're allowing him to finish the season. There were reports. The one that you mentioned was also something that I saw. The others that I saw is that I don't know. Apparently, I mean, I'm not a big Ed Orgeron guy. I don't really know much about him personally. Um, I guess there he has like I don't know girlfriends, and he's allowing their sons to come partake in reps during LSU's practices. I don't know how old these kids are. I don't know if they're middle school, high school, or I'm assuming that they can't be any more than high school if they're, being allowed just to only take reps. I don't think they're part of the actual, they don't go to school at Louisiana State. There was that I heard. There was also the fact that they said he lost the team and his coaching staff. So that says a lot for a guy to lose his team and his coaching staff. When you lose a team as a coach, that's not a pretty thing. It's not at all. Like we've seen things happen in the past, and I don't have anybody to name specifically, and I won't go there. But at the same time, there have been coaches that have lost their team, and you see how bad that can be. And actually, I will mention this. Is the most recently I can remember is the Indiana Pacers firing their coach from last year. He lost the team. And when you lose a team and your front office or your higher ups know about it, Clark, you're out of there, man. Like they can't afford you losing your team. Like if you don't know, you know what I'm saying. That you have no control over what goes on, and you're not playing that well. I mean, that's a recipe for disaster. So I don't think the play did much because I mean, again, and I say this to say to be frank. For those of us that do watch college football, and Clark, you may or may not agree with me here, but that team ever since they lost a lot of those guys to the NFL from that championship team, they really had a hard time reloading. Some teams rebuild, some teams reload. You see Alabama, the Ohio States, usually the Clemsons of the world, they reload. Whoever they bring in the next year will probably be just as good as who left, if not better, or if not close to as good. In his case, he didn't get that with LSU. At LSU, he didn't really get the reloading. He was rebuilding, and that's the reason why I think we saw LSU struggle since they won the title. And then we know now he lost the team, which is probably also the reason why you saw LSU struggle as well.
Yeah, and he was a great defensive coordinator before he became the head coach. So maybe
Yeah,
that's where he should kind of go into, maybe into his next job if he happens to get one, is just be a defensive coordinator. But if you want a little bit more of a recency about coach losing his team, just look at the Jacksonville Jaguars this year, and I think we're going to be
yeah.
right in that ballpark as well. But just for this news, yes, Ed Orgeron will be out as coach at the end of this season. So they will be looking to find a new coach, maybe someone a little bit younger. Who knows? We'll see what happens moving forward with that team. Last but not least, in the news and notes, just a quick little update for the MLB playoff show. As of this moment, the Houston Astros are up 3 games to 2 over the Boston Red Sox in a series that features zero pitchers. At this point, it's just home runs, grand slams for the most part. They are just runs are dominating that series. I think the Red Sox have hit two in one game over in game two, so that's
Yep.
how many have been hit at this point. Um, and as for the other series that will actually be playing tonight, the Braves are up 3 games to 1 over the Dodgers in a little bit of a surprise. The Braves are playing out of their mind at this point. Unfortunately for the Dodgers, they've gotten dealt with a lot of injuries up until this point. I think they just lost Turner last night for the rest of the playoffs. Um, but keep this in mind, that is an Atlanta team, and we all know what happens with Atlanta teams when they have a sizable lead. I won't jinx them or anything, but
Might have
being
already.
it might happen already. They are up 3 games to 1. They'll be playing tonight, hopefully to close out that series and heading back to the World Series for the first time since what year, Fletch?
Oh man, beats me, bro.
First year since 1999 was the last time they were in the World Series when they lost to my Yankees that year. But it's
Okay.
been quite a while since the Braves have been to the World Series. Um, we'll see what happens tonight. Hopefully, they can clinch, or the Dodgers can make it a little bit more interesting. But that is the news and notes for this week. Fletch, as we mentioned earlier, uh, we have a little bit of a celebratory year in the NBA. It
Oh
is their
yeah.
75th year of the NBA. It just recently got started as of 2 nights ago when 2 games were played. The world was abuzz because when it comes to the NBA, they wanted to talk about the Lakers and their first loss against the Golden State Warriors. And I think within minutes of them losing that game, I thought I saw headlines across the board about how
Yeah.
Russell Westbrook just doesn't fit this team. Do I have to be the Aaron Rodgers at this point and say, relax? It's been one
Oh my
game?
gosh.
My goodness.
It's it exactly, exactly. So we overreacted when the Packers lost to the Saints this year because of how they lost week 1, right? And a lot of people did overreact. This is a bigger overreaction. The NBA plays 4 times as many games as the NFL does. And it's one game. One game in the regular season does not really hold, especially the beginning of the season, holds no weight. I say Westbrook. I hope he did take the advice of LeBron James. LeBron James told him to go home, relax, see your family, go watch a comedy, smile, laugh. It's one game. It's only one game. It'll be fine. I love that. I absolutely love what LeBron said because he's right. Russell Westbrook is one of those guys, the probably the most intense competitor in in today in basketball today. And he wants to win every game. And rightfully so. I love that about Russell Westbrook, and I think those that love him, that's the reason why. Ultimately, though, we got to look at the bigger picture with the Los Angeles Lakers. That is an old team. They're not here to play for the regular season. LeBron James is here to play for rings. Anthony Davis is here to play for rings. Russell Westbrook is here to play for rings. We're not playing for the best record in the regular season. They probably could give, you know, they probably give no care in the world about losing or not even getting home court advantage in the regular season. They just want to be in the playoffs because they know once they're in the playoffs, if they're healthy and they're rolling, they're going to be one of the favorites easily. And let's not forget, people still fear LeBron James. So let's just pump the brakes, like you said, in the name of Aaron Rodgers. Relax, see what happens. That's a good Golden State team over there as well. Very cohesive. If you remember from last year, they fought the Lakers in the playing game, and then the Grizzlies, and then lost. But if you look at that team, they're bringing back everybody that they had last year. And at this point, they're waiting on James Wiseman to come back. They're waiting on Klay Thompson to come back. That is a team that is a force to be reckoned with. And the Lakers also only had 2 of the same players play last night that were even on the team last year, an entire new cast. So it wasn't just Westbrook; it was the fact that there's no chemistry with the Los Angeles Lakers yet. So let's pump the brakes and chill out a little bit.
Yeah, and speaking of chilling out a little bit, I think it was Stephen A that was just very giddy after the Knicks had won in a double overtime game. He was very, very pleased to see
Yeah.
their opener game. I could be wrong, but I
Uh-huh.
didn't watch any of the game. I'm pretty sure at some point the fans were cheering defense, defense. Was both teams just confused when they said that word? I mean, I know there's not much defense in the NBA. Obviously, this is very entertaining, but it was a
Yeah.
very high scoring double overtime game. It was what, 148 to something like that. Um,
138 to 134 was the final score of that game. Very high scoring game though. A lot of threes were hit. At one point, I thought what's the guy's name? Brown. Jalen Brown. I thought he was going to go for 50, 60, 70 plus. I think he had finished the first quarter with 18, and I don't think he missed many shots at all. But it was a I will say Clark Stephen A is definitely overreacting, but it was a hell of a game. That was what I wish we saw opening night. To be honest with you, that was great. Knicks Celtics classic NBA matchup. Great players on both sides. Both playoff teams. Both have aspirations to make another push this year, and they made some moves in the offseason. And hey, I love it when a trade works out. Evan Fournier, or I shouldn't say a trade, a deal works out. Evan Fournier was a somewhat questionable pickup that we actually discussed on this podcast when we did our when we discussed the NBA a little bit as the offseason was really on fire with the free agency moves. And that was one that we questioned a little bit just because we didn't really understand the direction the Knicks were going. We liked the fact that they added another scorer, but we didn't know if that's really what they needed because they have R.J. Barrett on the wing as well. And he proved last night, man, that might be exactly what they needed. They need another guy that can handle, distribute, but ultimately put the ball in the basket. And Evan Fournier put the ball in the basket last night, and that's what led them to the dub last night. So that was a great game, Clark. Honestly, I started the game, passed out for a little minute, woke back up, and I'm glad I woke up when I did. I saw the entire fourth quarter and part of the third. So I saw probably, I don't know, a little bit over half the game in total, but I enjoyed myself, I will say.
Yeah, it was very entertaining type of game, even though you did fall asleep during it. But at this point, maybe a little
Late.
bit of defense might have kept you awake. Just throwing that out there. NBA teams that can hear us,
Very true.
just a little bit goes a long way. Obviously, we
Indeed.
mentioned it is the 75th year for the NBA. They're celebrating it. They're putting together the 75th annual team of 75 greatest
Yeah.
players of all time. We will actually get into that next week
Well,
and get
Clark, really quick, actually,
yes.
not to cut you off. While we actually, and everybody knows, we record on Thursday nights, we release Friday mornings. We were hoping that this list would be ready. Clark, the list was actually just finalized, I think, about 10 minutes ago. Um, so we're kind of in luck a little bit, and I won't go into a lot of detail with this list. But what I will do, Clark, is briefly highlight a few of the current players on this list, just to kind of give them a shout out, let the people know who they are if they haven't noticed this already. TNT has been going over this the last 3 days. I think ESPN had it yesterday, but Tuesday and today TNT had it. Nonetheless, some of the names that are added, and NBA does a great job of not putting this in order. It's alphabetical order by day. So really quick, Clark, I'll just run these. I'll gloss over these names real quick for you. Giannis Antetokounmpo, Kevin Durant, James Harden, and actually we're gonna do the people that didn't make the 50, because it's not really a long list at all. Steve Nash, Dirk Nowitzki. That was all from day one. Day two highlighted Tim Duncan, rightfully so. Kevin Garnett, Allen Iverson, um, Chris Paul, and that was all the new players from day two. Day three, which was today. These are the ones that are announced today. Ray Allen, the late great Kobe Bryant, Stephen Curry, LeBron James, Jason Kidd, Kawhi Leonard. A surprise, but my current favorite player, Damian Lillard, Reggie Miller, who was not on the original team. For those that, well, let me make sure I'm not. Oh, I'm sorry, Paul Pierce and Dwayne Wade. I apologize, and Gary Payton as well. The one thing that I will mention on this list, Clark, that I really like to see, and I hate it because he should be here, so I shouldn't say I really love to see it. But I have a quick thing to mention about Shaq. Shaq had been playing in the league for 4 years and was already put on this list of the top 50. I just want to throw that out there. If you go and look at this 75 list, there's no one drafted in the last 5 years that is on this list. So I just want to mention that that is an incredible feat. You were in the league for 4 years, and enough people felt highly enough about you that you were in the top 50 of all time. I just want to mention that while we talk about the top 75. There's other names that are mentioned, and also too, Clark. What the analyst or the NBA tried to do is they allowed voters that were either that followed the NBA closely or played in the NBA. Ernie Johnson and Charles Barkley being two of them, as they mentioned that they were voters on TNT, mentioned that they would not touch the original 50 and they only put a new 25 in. So I think we got a mixture of that. We got some people that were actually left off the list this time, and some people that made the list before of the 50 when they did it back in '97, and then this time around, some of them didn't make the list, and they added some new guys in. I need to ask because that was a hot topic on Tuesday night when I was watching the NBA tip-off show. Clark, how do you feel about that? How do you feel about them removing some of the 50 and recreating a new 75?
I'm totally fine with it. I mean, you're going to have players that are going to beat out some of the older players. It's just what it is. I mean, Shaq beat out some of the players that were great before his time. It's the only difficult thing is obviously you're trying to compare apples to oranges is the only hard part, but beyond
With
that,
Eris?
yeah, I mean, you're going to have players like, before Michael Jordan came to the league, there was somebody else that was really, really good before him. And then guess what? He
Hmm.
came along and proved that he was just as good, if not better, than what they were. It happens all the time.
Hmm.
So I understand that they didn't want to touch the original 50, but at the same time, you're going to have players that are going to be better than those were. Now, granted, you can't be 100% sure because they don't play against the same players. They don't play with the same rules. The 3 point line didn't come
Right.
in until later. There was goaltending that didn't come in until later. So players like a George Mikan that dominated before that was a rule was just insane. But imagine having Shaq in the or even Yao Ming back when goaltending was never a thing. I mean, come on,
Yeah, it's a great point.
it would
It's a
dominate.
great
So
point.
you're trying to make apples to oranges, but yes, when you're talking about, are you going to have new players? Are you saying that those 50? I mean, if you want to say top 50 players from this certain to this time frame to this time frame, go. That's totally fine. But if you're going to say all time,
Hmm.
you got to reevaluate it with every single year with new players that come in because eventually maybe some of these rookies will jump into the fray as well with when it gets to the
Right.
top 100 or what have you. But yeah, it's just part of the process at this point. Now, if you want to save them and have a better complete list, just go by decade. Then you'll have an exact idea because those players played against one another. They played with the same rules. They played against the exact same teams. I mean, you can do that, but when you're trying to compare
Yeah,
George Mikan to Shaq, there is no
it's
comparison.
hard.
It
Yeah,
it's
it's very hard.
impossible. Just like when they tried to
I
talk
agree.
about LeBron and MJ, they never played against one another. They didn't play in the same time frame. You can't really
Yep.
compare.
It's
There's
all
a
a matter of opinion between those two.
yeah, it's a popularity contest at that point, eh, but it's fine. I mean, eventually there were going to be players like LeBron shows up. He's going to be in the top 50 somewhere or in the top 75. I mean, it happens. I
Hmm.
mean, uh, records are meant to be broken, and listing the greatest players of all time is meant to adjust over time. Unless you're just
Agreed.
one of the greatest of all time, then you're going to stay towards the top of the list. It happens.
Exactly. Yeah, I don't think we'll see any LeBron James or Michael Jordans or Magic Johnsons moved off this list. So I do agree with you because if you're going to rank the top 75 players of all time, and then grant I'm glad they don't actually like list them 1 through 75, that these are just the 75, because it is up to opinion on who's here. And like you said, if players played against each other, it's a little bit easier to rank them than it is for players that didn't play against each other. So I agree with the process as well. I think that it is a great thing that they did, because if you look at it, if you want to go ahead and be like, okay, well, they took my guy off the list. Well, they didn't really take him off the list. He's still on the 50. back in '97. He's just not on this new 75 here in 2021. Times have changed. Unfortunately, he just didn't make this cut. He was on the original team. So at one point, he was one of the top 50 players of all time. And you can still have that opinion that he's still one of the top 50 players of all time. Um, there was a list on, they came on the screen kind of earlier in the podcast that I saw of notable names that were left off the list. I won't really go into them at all, but that's something for the people at home to do. Go check out that 75, see who was missing from the original 50, and make your opinion from there. Or also too, any players from these last couple decades that were not added to the list. There was one that I was a little bit surprised about, and that was Vince Carter. So because and the reason why I mention him is because they reason why a lot of them say, or why Ernie, I'll use him as an example. Ernie Johnson said he didn't want to take any of the original 50 off because those 50 tell the story about the first 50 years of the NBA. Fair enough, but that's why we have that list still in our archives. Um, Vince Carter to me does tell the story of the last 75 years. In a lot of eyes, he's the greatest dunker the NBA has ever seen. Not to mention he was a bona fide all-star perennially with the Raptors and also with the Nets, and then had a long storied career where he helped a lot of young players out towards the back end of his career as he bounced around, over the years. And I think he finished, I want to say, with the Hawks. So, or Hawks are, gosh, I can't remember. He played with the Kings, the Hawks, the Grizzlies towards the end of his career, Mavericks. I know the Suns as well. But he helped a lot of young guys out, and a lot of young guys speak very highly of him too, just about what he was able to do for him. So I was kind of expecting him to be there. Also, with his involvement in USA basketball this summer, he was the one of the announcers or commentators for the USA basketball games for those that watch the Olympics. And just his involvement recently, I would assume that would also just at least give him somewhat of a nudge into the 75. I know it's not anything on the court, but just seeing how involved he was even after he was done playing. And what he was able to do when he was playing, I thought that might be enough to leave him or to get him on that list. But nonetheless, I just wanted to kind of mention the notables that were not on the original 50 that have now made the 75. I guess, Clark, we can kind of move on a little bit and wrap up the NBA with the last bit of news that I had. We have some Ben Simmons updates for the people. Clark, are you ready?
Go for it.
All right. So from last week, remember Ben Simmons? I think at this point we knew he was suspended a game, or did we actually? I'm sorry, that might be more recent news. Was he suspended by the time we did our podcast last week?
I don't believe so, no.
Okay, so we just knew he wanted out, but we knew he no, that's what it was. We knew he showed up. And the most recent news is that he was asked to hop into a defensive drill. He refused, therefore he was thrown out of practice and thus suspended the game. Joel Embiid went on did a quick little press conference. Nothing major. They always have these, but they had just asked him, about the situation, and he basically said, "I don't care about that man. He's going to do what he's going to do." Um, and that's kind of true. Like he's going to do what he's going to do. So with that being said, with the situation now, what's being said is that Ben Simmons still wants out of Philly. He's doing everything in his power to want out of Philly, which is the reason why I'm assuming, doing these things. On the flip side as well, the other thing that's kind of been thrown out there is an injury that we have no clue about out of nowhere. I don't even know what the injury is. I believe the injury is a scapegoat to get him out of Philly as well, or allow him not to suit up for the 76ers until they figure out what they're going to do with him. Also, too, there's a meeting supposed to be going on with Ben Simmons in the front office of the 76ers as well. So, I mean, we'll see how that goes just over the next, I don't know, weekdays to the next week or so. But it's becoming a big saga, you know, with the Sixers being possible title contenders and having this kind of looming over their heads here. So we'll see how things go. Clark, I don't know if you caught this. The Pelicans, they played New Orleans Pelicans last night, and they were chanting, "Where's Ben Simmons?" I found that comical. So another classic troll.
Yeah, we'll have to keep an eye on this one because I think there was even mention about it could be a long 4 years between the 76ers and Ben Simmons from what I last read. But at this point, I think Vince
Mhm.
Carter, I think in the video that he just put out recently, uh, said it best. Just find a way to move on from this. Trade him, move on. You
Yeah.
may not get that value, but obviously it's not working out. Let somebody else deal with it. Um, But yeah, we'll keep an eye as we continue to go along because it just continues to linger on for almost no reason at this point. But we'll see what happens with Ben Simmons moving forward. Anything else in the NBA before we move forward?
No, that was pretty much it, Clark, as far as NBA goes.
All right, and I guess one last thing I do have is let's keep a weight watch on the young star down there in New Orleans. He came into camp. I don't know why I'm blanking on his name at this point. Uh,
Zion Williamson.
Zion Williamson coming into camp 300 plus pounds, shocking most of the people that were there. So, much like we did with Eddie Lacy in the NFL, we'll have to keep a weight watch on him to see exactly if he can get back into playing shape or maybe he can dominate at this new weight. We will see, but that was definitely a shock to the brass there in Pelicans land.
Yeah,
So let
we'll
us
see
go
how that
ahead.
goes. That's not what you want to hear.
Yeah, definitely not something that you spend up to do and then you figure it out a little bit later on. But let's go ahead and jump into college football. The AP poll week 8 has come out with a bunch of
Yes.
losses. The most surprising loss with Iowa losing to Purdue, getting slacked pretty hard. That was pretty much a blowout for the most part. So having that on your resume is pretty much a no go for the playoffs. So even if they win out and win the Big Ten championship game, it's not going to sit well. They're going to need so much to happen in order to get into the Final Four because the committee just doesn't like blowouts on your record, especially against non-ranked opponents. Even though Purdue continuing to win, actually they are ranked 25 this week, so they're getting a little bit of help there, but not a whole lot. Um, but
Right.
as for the poll, Georgia's still number one. Cincinnati moved up to number two, or Oklahoma at three. Alabama moved up to four. Ohio State at five. Michigan jumped up to number six. Penn State up to seven. Oklahoma State from 12 to 8 after a nice win. Michigan State jumping up as well to number 9 and Oregon at number 10. This week, games wise, there's no ranked opponent versus ranked opponent this week. Everybody plays a non ranked opponent when it comes to the top 25. It will be interesting to keep an eye on, obviously, the Big Ten because they still have four teams in the top 10 at this point, and if they all win, moving into next week, you'll have a highly ranked Ohio State versus Penn State and Columbus under the lights at 7:30, as well as the first time since 1964, Michigan versus Michigan State, both ranked in the top 10, assuming they
Hmm.
both win this week, which will help kind of clear out a little bit of crowdiness that the Big Ten has in the top 10 at this point. Fletch, at this point, when you're looking at the schedule, the upcoming games, is there anybody you're worried about potentially being an upset alert or just a game that you like in general?
Well, there's two. One, we already have an upset. If you were like me and decided to tune into some random football on Wednesday night, Coastal Carolina took a loss to Appalachian State. So you have the quote unquote highest rated team in the Carolinas, ironically enough, with Coastal Carolina taking an L to their conference rivals there in Appalachian State, 30-27. So I mean, one upset has happened. The other one that I am actually just the one I'm really looking at here to possibly be another upset. Um, Kind of a few games, but I'll just kind of mention the one that I'm really intrigued about, and that's Oklahoma State at Iowa State. I don't know how good Iowa State or Oklahoma State really is. I think we know how good Iowa State is. Iowa State was highly ranked coming into the season, won a couple games, stayed there, but then they took a tough loss to Iowa, and then now Iowa's, they took a loss as well. So we know we know this about Iowa State. A decent football team. We know that they have some really good players on both sides of the ball. We know they're very well coached because they don't really, they don't seem rattled. When they lose, they just lose, in my opinion, just from watching them play a few times this season. Oklahoma State did have a really big win this past week, but I just really don't know exactly how good they are. And I think this would be a good test. It's in Oklahoma or in Iowa. Um, they're at Jack Trice Stadium. It's 3:30. I mean, you could see a bit of fireworks there. So I'm curious to see how that game goes. Outside of that, I'm really not seeing too much. I mean, you have the classic matchup between USC and Notre Dame, but I'm expecting Notre Dame to, to handle business. But yeah, that's the one I'm looking at right now, Clark, as far as what's left here on the schedule. What about you, man?
The only game that you have to keep a little bit of an eye on, just because of who they've lost to, they've all lost to ranked opponents, and that is Indiana at home under the lights against Ohio State. Now, granted, Ohio State's offense has looked
Mm.
extremely good, but Indiana has played tough against ranked opponents. Their only losses against Cincinnati, they lost against Penn State. I think they lost against Michigan. I can't remember their other loss, but they play ranked opponents tough, and obviously this
Iowa.
coaching staff just really plays well against ranked opponents. I don't think they pull the upset, but it could be a little bit more interesting than expected at this point in Indiana. Um,
Time game too. It makes
yeah,
sense.
and they put it underneath the lights a couple weeks ago, which was a little bit of a surprise. Everybody was kind of thinking the Penn State game, which is now under the lights, so everybody can take a little bit of a breather there. But obviously, that game will look a little bit better if both Penn State and Ohio State win this week. Now, one last question before we
Yeah.
move on to the NFL. Alabama currently a 25-point advantage against Tennessee. Is there any chance that Tennessee can lose by less than 25 points in this one?
No, they get decimated.
I am
I'll just be
I'm
flat
a
out there.
little surprised that it's only 25.
Yeah, I'm thinking more 35 is my would be my line um that would put on this game, to be honest with you. Um it does make interesting. I guess like you said, kind of really before we move on, I'm glad we kind of stopped here because it is interesting. I guess Clark, let me ask you, and I think you know a little bit better than me. When does the college football playoff ranking begin? Is that next week or the week after? I know we're really
The week
close.
after, November 2nd, is when that rankings will
Okay.
come out. So for us, we'll actually have to do a quick little video on Monday evenings to do our prediction show, and then do a quick live session as they come out, either Tuesday or maybe even do the reaction on Thursday. We haven't quite talked about it at this point, but we'll definitely have to do something, just a little quick thing on Monday, just to do our predictions on Monday, because we got to kind of figure out who wins the games on Saturdays in order to do the
Exactly.
prediction. But we still may do our reactions on Thursday's show moving forward. But stay in tune for that. Once we finalize the time, I think we'll finalize it before next week, and we will let everybody know moving forward. But yes, November 2nd is when the first rankings
Okay.
come out. And again, the committee is looking for figure out who you are, if you have any big wins on your resume, and do you have any big losses on your resume, because they won't like it if you do. Um,
Right.
and at this point, I think
Right
we know who
now,
number one is pretty simply.
yeah. Yeah, I would agree. The two that I think will probably be on the lookout, Clark, is the number 2 and 3 teams in the country, Oklahoma and Cincinnati, just because we know how the country or we know how the committee has routinely over the last, 6 7 years that this thing has been rolling, how they view these group of five or mid-major schools. So we'll see how they feel about Cincinnati. This year, Cincinnati does have a better resume going for them, so I don't think they'll slight them much. But then you have Oklahoma, who is every tough opponent they've played against has been a close game. Really, every game has been close. I mean, up to this point, I just want to double check and make sure I'm not misspeaking here. No, I said this on the last week's show. Um, they have won every game except against TCU. That was their first win by more than one score. So we will see how the committee views that, as well as see how the committee views Cincinnati and their schedule with a quality win over UCF and a big win over Notre Dame. 24-13 was that score. And then Cincinnati does have SMU, who is ranked 21 right now, down the line. And so I'm very curious when these first polls come out if Cincinnati and Oklahoma are still undefeated on how they will be ranked. I have an idea on Ohio State because we'll have the Ohio State Penn State game, so we'll know between those two teams on who's going to be able to maybe make it in or be stuck at 5. And then obviously Alabama, we will see how high or low they rank them. I would assume they will be in your top 4 as long as they continue to win as well. But I think those are the things that I'm looking forward to in the next couple weeks with the playoffs, especially with a few big matchups coming up.
Yeah, and just like I mentioned earlier, with that cluster of a bunch of Big Ten teams, we'll know within the next couple of weeks, especially with the potential two top 10 games next week, as long as they win this week. But 1 week at a time, they've got to win this week moving forward. Before
Mhm.
we go to the NFL, I want to thank our wonderful sponsor, Legit Framing. Yes, you have stuff that you want framed, you have some jerseys you want to show it off to all your friends, maybe have a Halloween party that you want to show them off at, or you have a Friendsgiving that you have every single year. This is the time to do it. Simply go to facebook.com/legitframing or legitframing at hotmail.com and get your free quote today. Again, Legit Framing, create your next conversation piece. And now we move on to the NFL schedule. It's nice and loaded on your screen if you're watching on YouTube. If you are listening, if you go to basically any ESPN.com, NFL.com, you can pull up the entire schedule. There are 6 teams, like we mentioned, on a bye this week, which is not making it fun for fantasy purposes, but for the NFL, we had to pick 6 of these remaining games, 6 of the 13 games in order to do our pick six this week. Obviously, tonight, Denver versus Cleveland. We did not pick that one because we want you to play along. Simply put in the comments who you want to win each and every single game. We'll add you to the list. And at the end of the year, we'll see how well you do against us. And granted, last week, just everyone did about better than what we did last week there, Fletch. We both went 2-4 last week. It was
Yeah.
not great for us, but hopefully we can get back on track this week. We have, again, 6 wonderful games to choose from. This week, let's start off with the Chiefs versus the Titans. We have seen King Henry kind of cement himself as A, the best player this year, not only in real football, but in fantasy football by quite a large margin. But B, we've also seen the Chiefs that are kind of vulnerable at this point. They really haven't put it together. Patrick Mahomes, again, still, I think the last stat that I've seen, he's thrown 13 interceptions over the last 15 games, something like that. He is quite quite inaccurate over these last 15 or so games. In between these two teams, for me, how are you going to go against King Henry? I've got the Titans. Fletch, who do you got?
Yeah, man. It's been very weird. Is the word that I'm gonna use. What's going on with Kansas City right now? And also Pat Mahomes. We know Pat Mahomes is a bit of a gunslinger, but just how great he's played since he's been in the league, especially lately. Just not something we like to see. But with the offense, with Kansas City offense still being explosive as they are, but having some struggles, you're kind of expecting maybe somewhat of a high scoring game this week. But the problem over there in Kansas City is still that defense, man. I don't see how they can stop Derrick Henry and company either. I'm going to go with the Titans on this one. Tannehill is a very good quarterback. Um, Derrick Henry has proven that he's the best running back or the best player in the league right now. I think he kind of took last year and him not being named the best. I know McCaffrey is rated higher than him on Madden. He doesn't have an MVP. He's had a 2,000-yard season. I think he has a chip on his shoulder, man, and he's been playing out his mind. So I'm going with the Titans.
Very good pick. And I just had a little bit of a breaking news coming from Sleeper app. Obviously, if you are on Sleeper, you get the news very quickly. And speaking of that chip on your shoulder, maybe not the best wording to use, but it has been reported by Jay Glazer that Baker Mayfield also has a fractured humerus bone in his shoulder, including a
I
torn
see that.
labrum. Um, Last time I checked, that's pretty much surgery listed in his future somewhere along the line. We'll see exactly what happens there, but I'm gonna. This one could be tough for the Browns moving forward. They're having quite a bit of a down year after such a tremendous year they had last year. So we'll keep that in mind. Let's go ahead and move on to our next game of the Pick Six. We have the Bengals versus the Ravens. The battle for the supremacy of the AFC North at this point. The Ravens have a one-game
Oh
lead
yeah.
over the Ravens or over the Bengals that have been playing very, very well of late. And this one for me, I got to go with the Ravens. I think they're just going to continue to move forward. Lamar has been throwing the ball tremendously well. Haven't really seen him run the ball that much because when you throw it to your receiver and they catch it, they do really good things. Fletch, do you also
Yeah.
agree?
I do agree. I do agree. I think the Ravens win this game. I want to mention this about this game. Clark, I don't know if you've noticed this. There's been two things going on, two storylines with these two teams. The Bengals have essentially, I don't know, they're flying completely under the radar. They're 4-2 if I'm not mistaken, right?
Correct.
Okay, and they are a very good team, very well put together. All the little question marks we heard about Joe Burrow's knee, Jamar Chase, dropping passes and not being able to catch the NFL ball, it's erased. It's done. These questions are no longer valid. They've both been playing extremely well. Joe Mixon's been playing well. The defense has actually been playing well. On the other is the other unique storyline. Mina Kimes over at ESPN, I love how she said this. I've never seen the goalpost moved more for any one player than Lamar Jackson. It's no matter how well he plays, it's almost like they still treat him or talk about him as a running back playing quarterback, and it's very unfair. In my opinion, it's a very unfair criticism of his. I also too, I didn't realize this. I think last game or the game prior, can't remember, but the news came out. I think that was the first time a pass or a unnecessary roughness or roughing the passer call was ever called against Lamar Jackson. I get he runs a lot, but I'm pretty sure he's had at least one late hit in his NFL career, and before that, so very very interesting. Those are two storylines that I just found kind of unique with these two teams. One that Cincinnati, no one's taking them seriously, even though they've actually some formidable teams and maybe should be 5-1 if they make a field goal first against Green Bay in that wild overtime game we saw. And then on the flip side with Lamar Jackson, it's like we can't keep moving the goalposts and expecting more from a guy that you mentioned it perfectly, Clark, that has been playing very well as a passer. He's been passing the ball extremely well. Marquise Brown has been benefiting from this. Mark Andrews has been benefiting from this. The running backs are now not overused. Lamar Jackson's legs are now not overused. I'm picking the Ravens on this, mind you, but at the same time, I don't wanted to mention these things because these are very unique things, and now we have the AFC title, at least as of today on or as of Sunday on the line, which always makes for a great football game in my opinion with that football conference or division. So I'm pumped for that game. That's one game I'm looking forward to. I have the Ravens. I can't bet against Lamar Jackson this season. He's proved me wrong more times than I like to admit. So I'm rolling with Lamar Jackson in the Baltimore Ravens.
Hey, nothing wrong with that. Picking Justin Tucker as the better kicker between those two teams is always a good thing. Moving on to our next game,
Yes,
we have the lowly Jets versus the lowly Patriots. Both teams struggling this season, obviously. Both have rookie quarterbacks leading the way. This one we put on the board just because why not? Plus, we only had 13 games to
exactly.
choose from. Uh, I've got the Patriots winning this one. Who do you got?
Hey man, we're on the same boat here. 3 games in a row. I have the Pats as well. I do not trust rookie quarterbacks against Bill Belichick. I think we'll see a bad game from Zach Wilson. I think the Pats will play well. I think Mac Jones will play very solid, and I think they'll take this one home. I wouldn't say too easily, but the line is 7 points. I'm going to say they're going to cover the spread.
Yeah, I agree. And your very first point about rookie quarterbacks going up against Bill Belichick, you never go against Bill Belichick in this one. That's why we both have the Patriots. Moving on, we have the Bears versus the Buccaneers, a team of the Bears that is trying to find its identity on offense. Justin Fields hasn't quite figured it out at this point, not as quickly as we thought he would. And on the other side, the ageless wonder, Mr. Tom Brady, just maybe it's only his fifth year in the NFL, maybe his sixth year. He just continues to move forward. He's fine. Clearly, I've got the
Yeah,
Buccaneers winning this one. Fletch, I assume you agree.
I do. I do. I do agree. I actually, I actually like what's going on in Chicago right now. They're 3-3, and if people forget, they were a playoff team last year, regardless of who was playing quarterback. So I think you're seeing Fields slowly develop over the course of the season. I think this is a good test for him because the Buccaneers have arguably one of the best front sevens in the league. The secondary is a bit undermanned right now, and probably a little undermanned in the first place. So they're losing. They lost quite a bit of starters. They brought in Richard Sherman, who tweaked his hammy, and he's also out for a little while. So I'm expecting Justin Fields actually to have a pretty solid game. I don't expect for this game to be that close, though. I think Tampa Bay is just overall too much of a team to really like worry about this game at all. I got the Bucks winning pretty handily.
Nothing wrong with that there. Moving on to the Sunday night football game, we have the Colts versus the 49ers. I think Jimmy G is going to be starting this one because Trey Lance is injured at this point. The Colts' run game has been very, very good of late. JTT
Mhm.
has been dominating against opponents. 49ers not as strong as they were in the past against the run, I will say that. But offensively, as long as Debo Samuel is open, they're going to get him the ball, and he is going to run a long, long ways. Granted, Kittle is out for this one, so we might see a little bit more of Brandon Ayuk, a little bit of usage in this one, but he hasn't really been involved all that much this year. This one is a little bit more of a coin flip for me, just because I'm not sure exactly if my Niners can get it done this week. But I do have my 49ers, who I've been 0 for 2 picking this year. Why not go for 0 and 3? But maybe 1 and 2 will just happen for me. I've got the 49ers. Who do you got?
Clark, I've been back and forth on this game all week. I'm in a pick 'em sheets where we pick every game at work. We do our pick six. We talk often. We're in the same fantasy football league. I know you have other leagues you're in. I'm in other leagues. This game is a coin flip for me as well. I've been really, really teetering back and forth. So I'm just going to tell the people I told you the Niners yesterday. I'm changing my pick here today. I'm going with the Colts. I don't know what it is. It's just something about my feeling about this game. I think the Colts just get it done. The Colts have been playing pretty good football. They just, lost some close games this year. With one of them being the most recent. I think the Ravens game last week is what it was. They lost the nail biter there. I mean, 4-point spread. The Niners have been, a little bit hit by injuries. You mentioned it, and this is part of the reason why I'm picking the Colts. Is Jonathan Taylor has been playing extremely well. Um, and I think that's going to have a lot to say about this game. The other person that has been playing well that has swayed my opinion today, and granted, it's funny. We record these on Thursdays. I might have a different opinion on Friday, to be completely honest with you. Um, the last player that I want to mention that's kind of swayed my pick here is Carson Wentz. Carson Wentz has been playing good football. I think he will play good football Sunday night, and I think they get it done, man. I'm gonna switch my pick, and I'm gonna go with the Colts on this one.
I'm glad that you switched the pick. It would have been great had it been, I had the logo ready to go, but that's
I'm
fine.
sorry.
It's fine. I was able to switch it
It's
on the
okay.
fly. Some people will probably be like, why is he
Nice.
looking over at this other screen forever? Well,
It's
Fletch,
okay.
that's what happens when you change your picks. But it's fine. He's got
It
the
happens on
49ers.
live TV too. We'll deal with it.
Moving on to our last game, it is the Monday night football game. It is the Saints versus the Seahawks. Obviously, Geno Smith continuing to be the quarterback there with Russell Wilson on injured reserve. And then you have the Saints with their kind of offense, their really, really good defense. I've got the Saints winning this one. Fletch, who do you got?
Switch them out. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not gonna do that to you again. I
I
have the
saw it.
Saints as
I
well,
saw it in your
Clark.
eyes. You're about to switch it again.
I had to. You left me no choice there. But no, in all seriousness, I actually do have the Saints in this one still. I just don't trust Geno Smith leading the offense right now. I mean, that's saying a lot because I mean, not many of us trust Jameis Winston either. But I do think top to bottom, the Saints just have a more well-rounded football team than the Seahawks. Partially due to not having Russell Wilson. Um, it's hard for me to pick the Seahawks without Russell Wilson. Um, Extremely hard for me to pick them without Russell Wilson. I'm going with the Saints mainly for that reason, but also too, I think the Saints are at least a solid football team. And honestly, man, if the Saints win, they'll be 4-2. That's kind of interesting when we start to look at the NFC race a little bit because the I did not expect them to be anywhere near. I expected them honestly to have a losing record most of the season. So seeing them at 4-2, like you said, the defense is playing great. Kamara still does what he does. Mike Thomas, I heard, was a little. It may not be coming back as soon as they would like him to, but he's still in the fold to come back this season, which could help boost them, especially if they keep winning games. We'll see what happened Monday night, but I have the Saints as well.
Agreed. And like you mentioned, Michael Thomas typically was going to be back sometime within the next this week or the next 2 weeks, but it seems like it's going to be a little bit longer before he gets back. So the coaching staff there in New Orleans is going to continue to hold the reins for Jameis Winston just to make sure he doesn't put together uh, the type of season that you throw 30 touchdowns they'll take, but the 30 interceptions they don't want none of. So they are totally happy with him throwing very, very little in each of these games. And if you would like to join us in for these pick sixes, we'll be posting these on Facebook as well as various other places to simply put your picks in the comments. We will add you to the big board, and hopefully you can do better than what we did last week, and hopefully we can do better than last week as well. Let's go ahead into our
I hope
NFL
so.
top 10 teams here, 6 through 10. I will do this a little quicker here. At my number 10, I've got King Henry is their first time on my top 10. They have proven that, they're pretty good team. Defensively, they still have some question marks, but when King Henry runs for 3 touchdowns multiple times this year, it kind of demands that he's going to be somewhere in that top 10. At number 10, Fletch, who do you got?
Yes, sir. I have the Los Angeles Chargers. I have them taken a little bit of a step back. I think I had them as high as 6 last week, leading into that Ravens Chargers game. And I don't know if it was the Ravens or the Chargers, but the Ravens dominated from kickoff to the final whistle. And due to that, I gotta take them back a notch. But I do want to keep them at 10. I do think that Chargers team is a good team. They ran into a great Ravens team that is poised to do big things this year and currently doing a lot of big things. And I think that was part of the reason. It's kind of a recipe for disaster. So I got the Chargers sitting at number 10. They're what they've done this season is very good. Still, even with that loss on the record. So they're number 10 for that reason.
Agreed. And number 9, I have for the first time in my top 10 the Cincinnati Bengals. We talked a little bit about how much better they've played this year, and they're a good team.
Hmm.
Granted, they got to figure out that kicking situation. Oh, he's a rookie kicker. It's going to happen defensively. Uh, they're good. They're not overly great. They're not going to dominate games, but they are going to keep their offense in the games. And as long as Joe Burrow and that pass catching group stays healthy, and as long as Mixon stays healthy, uh, they are
Hmm.
going to go places. Fletch, who do you have at number 9?
I like the pick. I like the pick so much. I got the same team at number 9 as well. We got the Cincinnati Bengals. Clark, let me ask you this here: how many points total has Cincinnati lost by this season?
That is a great question. I want to say it's probably low numbers. How many points have they lost by this season?
6 total points. They
Wow.
lost against the Bears week 2, 20 to 17. Packers, and everybody knows what happened. 25-22. Quality team. Jaguars, they beat them, supposed to. Lions handled them 34-11. Supposed in Ravens this week. Let's the Raiders, the Steelers, Chargers, and Niners coming up here shortly. So they have a couple games in here that they may be able to get a couple wins out of, but then they have some tough games that will really be able to see what this team is made. Season they do have the Ravens, Chiefs, and Browns. So a list as you do, Clark, with a little bit of surprise. Some people could easily say they should be 2-4, but here they are at 4-2 and looking very good.
Agreed. And as again, both of our picks at number 9 are the Bengals. At number 8, I have the Chargers sitting at number 8. Again, a very good team put well together. They've got a very good receiving core. Love Mr. Herbert, fighting Herberts at number 8. At number 8, who do you got?
Yes, indeed. It looks like we flipped 8 and 10 here. I got the Titans head here at 8. I had them 10 last week, and then the win impressed me enough. They moved up on my list here. I got them moving up to 8. Again, just really like what I see. I think that was the first time we saw the big three together: Julio Jones, AJ Brown, and Derrick Henry. We're going to see a lot more of that this season. I think we'll see a lot more of Julio get a little bit more involved. By the way, Clark, did you see the catch Derrick Henry made last week? Catch there by Julio. Did you have a chance to catch that?
I saw the one with Julio, yeah, but for our viewers that haven't heard it, explain what happened.
Yeah, yeah, man. So I'm not sure DB was pass is thrown. DB's not looking back. Gets the pass interference called on him. Um, Ball hits him in the back of the helmet, pops up in the air head for the sideline. Julio dives, toe taps, which I don't know how he got his feet in. Nonetheless, toe tap, caught the ball, first down, play goes on. And honestly, man, it's been the catch of the year, but that was also to me the turning point in that game. That's you can kind of tell Tennessee made. I don't know if that gave him a little bit of boost there, but that was a hell of a catch and the best catch I've seen so far this year.
Yeah, it was an absolutely amazing catch. It looked like it might have not have been a catch to begin with, but definitely one of the better
Right.
catches of the year. Not to overshadow what King Henry did in that game, but definitely one of the better catches that we have seen in uh, at least this year, anyways. Moving on to number 7, I have the Dallas Cowboys sitting there again offensively. They are one of the better teams. They're on a bye this week. Hopefully, they can get Dak Prescott healthy moving forward. But for number 7, who do you got?
Yes, sir. My number 17 is actually the Green Bay Packers. Again, they're just, steady climbing up this board. I had them 9 last week. Let's be honest, if they don't lose so bad week 1, they're probably on our list to start. But nonetheless, here they are at 4-1 with the only loss, or excuse me, 5-1. But the only loss on their record being that opening game against the Saints. You could just tell they just laid an egg. So I mean, I'm honestly going to be not really going to be holding that against them any longer. I do think they'll continue to climb as long as they continue to win here. I got the Green Bay Packers here at number 7.
Very nice pick. I like it so much. I'm going to have at number 6 those same Green Bay Packers. I like them just a little bit more than you two.
You
Uh,
do.
but at number 6, who do you have?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. My number 6 is actually your number 7, the Dallas Cowboys. The Dallas Cowboys actually look like a very good, well-rounded football team. Not only on the offensive side of the ball do they look amazing as usual, on the defensive side of the ball, they look pretty damn good. Not saying that they're anything like any one of the top units in the league. I'm not sure exactly where, how they rank or rate them right now, amongst the whole 30-32. But at the same time, what we've seen this year is a much improved defense, especially over like the last, I don't know how long the defense has been porous and poor and under average to say the least over the last 4 to 5 years. This year, it seems all those defensive draft picks and the changes that they've made, they're looking pretty good. They're looking pretty good. I got them here at 6.
Very nicely picked there. So I'm going to rattle off my top 5 because honestly, there's only really one change in my top 5 from last week. My top 4 stay the exact same. It is the Bills at 4, the
Hmm.
Buccaneers at 3, the Rams at 2, and then the undefeated Cardinals at number 1. At number 5, I have the Ravens jumping into the top 5 this week. Again, we've talked about it quite a bit with Lamar Jackson just looking like a much more complete quarterback at this point, which is dangerous for anybody in the NFL because if you can't catch him running and he's throwing the ball better to his receivers, it makes for a very dangerous combination in that team potentially pushing for a uh, maybe a Super Bowl run this year. Who knows? Fletch at number 5. Who do you got?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I have the Ravens also at number 5, man. I actually had them at 5 last week. Good win against the Chargers. Um, I still have them at 5. I just could not put them above the 4 that are in front of them, just due to what the other 4 have done so far this season. There is one that I will. that there is one of these that I did debate very long about before solidifying them. I'm sorry, at number 5, and I'll kind of go into my top 5 as well if I can there.
Yeah,
At 5, of course, I do have the Ravens. At 4, and this is who I was debating with a lot, was the Bills. After that loss this past week, it was a tough loss. Um, we'll mention this here after we're done with our top 10, about the play call at the end of that game. But then 1 through 3, I have the Cards at 1. Finally, I'm on that bandwagon with you after the Bills there fell from number 1,
it's about
and then
time.
the I know, man. I know, man. I know Cards Nation's probably like, "What are you doing?" Half the country's probably like, "What are you doing?" I'm sorry, man. Up until the point, the Bills just looked really good. And granted, yeah, they didn't. They smacked around a bunch of teams they probably should have, but they just looked very complete. They still look complete against Tennessee. Just didn't quite get the job done. But I'm with the Cards, number 1, Rams number 2, and then the Bucks number 3. And obviously we mentioned them Bills 4, Ravens 5 to close out my top 5 there. Um, Clark, our top 10, we have the same teams, just a slightly different order, with a few kind of, swapped around here in spots. The one thing I will ask you is this. Um, as the next few weeks come and go, who do you see that's not on this top 10 list that you see possibly making this top 10 list?
With the teams that I have listed, I was going through a couple other ones that could potentially crack into the top 10. I know for a little bit I had the Panthers, but after their hot start, they have kind of fallen by the wayside at this point. Let me pull up my sheet here. A team that could potentially crack into the top 10. The Raiders got back on their winning ways after removal of their head coach, so they could potentially get back into that top 10. They're sitting at 4-2. The New Orleans Saints, if they just continue to win, they could potentially be back into that top 10 as well. Really, they'd be the only two teams that I can think of, unless we see a surprise game out of maybe like Minnesota could potentially be there. The Colts have a long way to go, but I kind of like what they're doing. Um, but yeah, at this point, it'd either be the Saints or, as I mentioned, the Raiders would be one of the top two on the outside looking in. Who are your outside looking in teams?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I'm outside looking in. Um, right now, I mean, the Saints are a good pick, and I really like that you mentioned them. The Saints have actually only given up 91 points this season. I know they have the bye week to help them out, but just looking at other teams as well, like for instance, the Niners also had the same bye week, and they've given up 119 points. So it just kind of shows you how well the Saints defense has been playing. So I think the Saints would be one of my first teams on the outside looking in. And then the other team would be also for me the Raiders. The one team to look out for moving forward, or two teams I should mention. One of them obviously is somebody that should be in the top 10, but I don't know what the hell is going on. Is the Kansas City Chiefs. I'm expecting them to make a run at some point this season and solidify their place again in our top 10. And the other team that I'm actually going to mention is somewhat of a surprise, and this is why they're power rankings, right, and not standings. The Indianapolis Colts actually have a plus in their point differential right now, but they're 2-4. That, you know what that tells me? That means they're in every game. I'm curious to just to see what happens now, because they are in a division that they have two teams that are essentially dumpster fire organizations right now. So you can almost lock in these wins moving forward, for at least for against those teams, as long as the Colts do what they're supposed to do. I mean, you have to play the games. That's why we play. But nonetheless, I'm expecting the Colts to really, show one that defense is as good as what they said they were coming into the season. And Darius Leonard spoke about how good they were, how good they were last season and how good they plan to be this season. So I expect him, leading that defense and to get a little bit better. And it looks like Carson Wentz is getting a little bit more comfortable. Jonathan Taylor's playing very well. They just got T.Y. Hilton back to add to that receiving core, to add a little bit more of experience and another deep threat to that receiving core. So I am very, very curious to see how good the Colts will actually be. in a tough conference that is the AFC moving forward. Again, if they get hot, they can really slide into that top 10 and possibly into the playoffs later this season.
Agreed. Some very, very nice picks there. And again, our top 10, like you mentioned, a lot of the same teams, the exact same teams, just a little bit different here and there. But I am finally glad that you have finally seen the light and put the undefeated Cardinals at the top. Um, Hopefully, if they continue to win, you'll keep them there. But who knows? Maybe the Rams will be pushing their way to the top at this point. They obviously have to face the Cardinals a couple times this season. So we'll see how that progresses. Fletch, anything else before we say our final goodbyes?
Not really. What? Well, actually, a couple things. I take that back. I always got something to say, Clark. You know me. Uh, few things to really look for. Obviously, this weekend, we talked about it earlier in the podcast. This is hell week for fantasy football. 6 teams on a bye week, all of which have a lot of players. We're only going to name a few: Steelers, Cowboys, Chargers. Are some of the teams. Bills are some of the teams that are really good right now that are going to be missing a lot of players from your lineup. So just prepare wisely for that. If you haven't already, you should have already. The other things to mention is that we will. I will be mentioning a little bit about the upcoming fight that we have with Canelo Alvarez and Caleb Plant. That'd be something I may touch on briefly next week, and then also I'll go into the NBA 75 a little bit, and I might have a few updates on some snubs that I feel like should have possibly made the list. And Clark, in your realm of things that I love to dibble and dabble in a little bit more as of lately, the baseball playoffs, MLB playoffs. I think come next week, Clark, where along the lines will we be? Will we be in World Series territory as long as these series, or will we be closer to 7 games if the series ends up going a little bit longer than they are looking like they're going to go?
By the time our podcast next week, we should know who's in the World Series. Yeah, I mean, I would imagine the
That's one
night.
thing that I don't care what sports you like.
Yeah, I would agree that the World Series is definitely one of the more exciting series to watch. But my guess is with the
Oh yeah,
injuries that the Dodgers are dealing with, the Braves should be able to handle things tonight, and then they'll have an off night tonight. But then I think they're going back to Houston for the next 2 games, so we will know uh, probably Saturday if they have to go to a game seven. We will know who represents the AL in the World Series.
awesome, awesome. Well, I'm looking forward to it. As usual. Have a great week of sports. For those at home, follow us on Twitter, aka Sports Pod. Subscribe, like, comment, all that good stuff. Clark, I'll hand it back over to you. You got anything else for us?
I think we are good for now. We'll keep an eye on all the sports this weekend, especially with college football. Hopefully, setting up some good matchups for the following week. And we have our college football playoff rankings on November 2nd, so be watching out for that as well. As for us right now, my name is Clark Heron, aka the Hairy Hobo. That's Fletch, and we're out of here.
Peace.